I'm Matt Lewis, and I'm here today with Washington Monthly's Bill Scher. Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt.
Great to talk with you. Lots to cover, and I think we should probably start with Kristi Noem, who is now being pushed out of her job, has been pushed out of her job. And, look, I think this was a long time coming. There was that horrible photo op she did at CCOT wearing the Rolex watch, kind of just this photo op using these apparently not even American, not even folks that came from America. I think they were El Salvadoran gang members or something. But then you obviously had Minnesota, and now most recently this very, very bad hearing before the House Judiciary Committee that did not go well. Any thoughts, Bill?
As much as there's a sort of visceral desire for a Schadenfreude here, I don't really love everybody letting Gnome take the fall for Trump's reckless mass deportation strategy. The buck stops at the president here. Trump. It's not like Trump is saying, "I'm really sorry, guys, that we poorly trained a whole bunch of new ICE recruits to execute a mass deportation strategy where we've repeatedly abducted the wrong people, sent them to far-flung countries where they have no ties to, and also killed some of our own American citizens." There's no owning of that. We're gonna blame Gnome because she concocted a giant ad campaign for herself. Who would have thought that in Trump's Republican Party, you shouldn't be a complete grandstanding showboater? Oh, does only one guy gets to do that, not everybody else?
Yes.
So I mean, I'm not going to shed a tear for Gnome, but I'm not going to pretend like problem solved because she got
no. Well, let me just push back a little bit, though, because I think there should be maybe a little bit of celebration here. Again, this is someone who used human beings caged as a prop. This is someone who referred to Alex Preddy as a, quote, domestic terrorist, or accused him of domestic terrorism, and claimed he had brandished a gun. And this is someone who, apparently spent a lot of money doing these ads, which, even if we put aside the fact that what got her in trouble was maybe the self-aggrandizement, the self-promotion, that is taxpayer money that she basically is wasting. And then there's the Corey Lewandowski stuff. It was Rep. Sidney Calmeger Dove of California who literally asked her during this hearing if she, quote, had sexual relations with Corey Lewandowski. And, she wasn't able to answer no to that question. And look, that's, they're both married, but let's put the moral stuff aside. Just from a professional standpoint, the biggest open secret in American politics, probably, this is someone who is ostensibly an underling of hers or a consultant. So I think maybe you're letting her off easy, Bill.
I'm not going to defend any of these actions, but these ethical standards flow from the top. Kristi Noem lied to cover up horrible actions by the federal government. Who is she? The only person in the Trump administration that does this? Donald Trump does it on a daily basis. She behaved in a way that her superior signaled is how we do business, and she's
not only how we do business. How if you're, let's say, it doesn't even have to be a woman, but there was an article in the New York Times today about sort of how this applies specifically to women in the Trump world who need to kind of maybe overcompensate to show how tough they are. Like, if you want to get to the top, you've got to sort of flex and be like vice signal, right?
And I would not totally sideline, misogyny here. She's being blamed, and I think a lot of gender language gets used for the self-aggrandizement that she's been doing when Donald Trump is the gold standard of self-aggrandizement. And people in MAGA world and Republican world are not holding Trump to the standard they're holding Gnome to.
That's fair, Bill, but just Look, we all know Donald Trump is a showboat. We all know that loyalty only goes one way to Donald, with Donald Trump. But having said that, isn't it also the case that we elected actually Donald Trump to be president? People voted for him, and if you're in Congress,
49% voted for him.
okay, but still, he got more votes. But whatever. Uh, um, if you're the principal, like you could be a member of Congress, you don't want an underling to be getting the attention. Like that could get you in hot water. This isn't just a Trump thing. This is when you are the principal, you are the one that should be getting kind of the praise and the attention. That they're all egomaniacs.
Well,
Let's be honest.
you
But
should be the one taking the blame when things go wrong because you're in charge. Look, and a lot of leaders like
fair.
having other people do the harder stuff to be the lightning rods that absorb the blow so they don't absorb it. But I mean, look, this deportation strategy was concocted very much. I mean, you talked about using humans as props. I mean, family separation was a hallmark of Trump's deportation strategy in the first term. It's not like Noam's some sort of innovator here. That you do horrible shock and awe type tactics as a way to not only deport people directly, but also to indirectly encourage self-deportation or create disincentive for people to come. This was part of the game plan from the first Trump administration. This is Stephen Miller, writ large. Is Stephen Miller being thrown under the bus here for these things? Of course not. Is
Yeah.
Tom Homan? No. I mean, Bovino was, but it's not like Homan's hands are clean here either. And what is striking to me is that immigration has always been central to Trump's reason of being. And every time his deportation strategy goes horribly wrong, it becomes a giant political albatross, but it's always somebody else's fault.
Yeah.
Uh,
Look, we can all agree, Bill, that the fish rots from the head, and the fundamental problem here is Donald Trump. Like that's obvious, but we can't get Donald Trump. Um, we can't get Donald Trump, but we can get Kristi Noem. We being the American taxpayer, members of Congress who are trying to hold people accountable. And so, is there any utility to exposing and taking down someone like Noem? Like, doesn't that send a signal to other people, other would-be Trump allies that like, hey, watch your back because you don't have carte blanche authority to just run amok and do whatever you want.
well, I think it would be very confusing. I think it has always been confusing how one carries themselves if you're going to be in Trump world. When is your awful behavior worthy of a pardon? When does it help you get elected, or when does it get you fired? There's very little rhyme or reason to it. There's not a lot of consistent standards here. So I think you do have to kind of always uh, want to walk on eggshells, but sometimes being grandiose is the right thing and being a wallflower is the wrong thing. So it's got to be a mind f all the time to want how one survives in that orbit.
I'm curious about this House Judiciary Committee uh, interrogation, which is what it turned out to be. I mean, usually what happens is that the Republicans, the Democrats are expected to ask tough questions of these administration officials, and the Republicans give them softballs or provide cover. In this case, you had Tom Tillis going after her for killing Cricket the dog, and then you had John Kennedy, Louisiana's senator, normally a Trump toady, is the one who really went after her and pushed her and got her to basically say that Trump approves this massive spending for this TV ad. What do you think is up there? Why were they doing this?
Well, Tillis is one foot out the door. Tillis is broken with Trump. He sacrificed his entire political career. He had it, and now he's been a loose can ever since. So one hand clap for Tom Tillis. Um, Kennedy is somewhat of a more interesting figure in my opinion. And I say this maybe like 6 times a year on social media. John Kennedy was a Democrat who endorsed John Kerry for president. Okay, this is not when he was a
Amazing.
child and he was an adult.
Yeah. He also
So
like went to Oxford or something. I mean, isn't he like he's got this corn pone, good old boy
yeah,
thing going,
it's
but isn't he like an elite, some sort of Ivy League elite or something?
yeah.
Something
So
like
on one hand, he is a colossal phony, okay? He is a
that. Big time.
massive opportunist who did what he had to do to have a viable political career in Louisiana in the 21st century when the Democratic brand, became totally, manure. But somewhere deep down in there is John Kennedy, the Democrat, who I think has determined that his shtick works. His book is a bestseller, uh, and he can play a kind of I'm just a regular guy, common sense dude. And this is not the first time that he's gone a little rogue in a Senate hearing. Uh, so again, if you're a Republican, you always have to be a little careful. How am I going to handle what's John Kennedy going to throw at me? Because you can't trust he's going to give you the softball because he often doesn't.
All right, before we go on, let me do some housekeeping. If you are watching this on like YouTube or whatever, listening to it, like, subscribe, rate, review, all that good stuff. If you are here live, if you follow me or are a subscriber to me, make sure to subscribe to Washington Monthly and Bill Scher, and of course, vice versa. Bill, so apparently not apparently, officially replacing Kristi Noem as head of DHS is going to be this guy, Markwayne Mullin, senator from Oklahoma. Apparently, he's famously challenged a Teamsters union president to a fight during a hearing a couple years ago. Recently, he called Senator Rand Paul a freaking snake. That's actually a quote. What do you know about this guy, and will he get confirmed? Because he has
I
to get
assume,
confirmed, I think, right?
I assume will get confirmed. He's in the club. He's a senator. You don't need 60, you need 50. He could shed a couple of Republicans, and Fetterman already said he's going to be for him. So, he could shed 3 Republicans, I think, and still get there. And it'd be very unusual for a fellow senator to fail to get a confirmation vote from his senators. So I think he'll get there. As you indicated, he is Trump-like. He's a live wire. He doesn't. He sometimes botches things. Just the other day,
And he
he
doesn't seem that smart or that smooth. And if this was an audition, if this past week was an audition, I don't know how he passed. He was like very bumbling and fumbling and all that.
again, what's politically fatal and what gets you promoted, again, there's little rhyme or reason to it. He seems to be close to Trump. They seem to talk a lot. Trump likes him on TV. He's a fighter, doesn't apologize, all that kind of stuff. Trump seems to like. This tells you nothing about his ability to administer a giant, complicated bureaucracy. Uh, uh, but we also don't really know what's also kind of in limbo here is where does the massportation program go from here? Trump got spooked by how badly Operation Metro Surge went, and they climbed down from the Minneapolis occupation. I doubt it's gonna be a genteel ice from this point forward. But I don't think they totally know where to go from here. And Holman seems to be driving that bus along with Stephen Miller, I suppose. Uh, how much Mullen really is a factor in deciding the policy and his capacity in executing the policy. I mean, I don't even know what kind of executive experience this guy has, to be honest with you. I wouldn't put someone in that Homeland
Yeah.
Security is
You're
a
overseeing
complicated
like
bureaucracy.
250,000 employees.
Yeah.
I mean, you could be a very successful senator managing dozens of staffers. You could be on a prestigious committee, but like to oversee that many employees is just very few people could actually competently do that. And I'm sure he's not one of them. He doesn't seem all that smart. I'm sure he's very tough. I think he was a former like MMA fighter, wrestler. So let's hope he doesn't see this video, Bill.
Yeah, but Trump, competency, long resumes, these generally aren't the things that get you into the Trump cabinet. So I wouldn't say I'm reassured by this pick.
I miss the days when our politicians I could kick their ass if I had to. Like the fat old. That bring back that smoke. They've been smoking the smoke-filled back rooms. They can't fight. All right. I guess we can move on. I guess we can move on to Texas. Final thoughts on Gnome, Mullin,
Well,
or any
no,
of
but I think
this?
Texas is a good segue here because, in Talarico, the Democratic nominee for Senate here, you don't have a blustery macho guy.
Mm-mm.
Uh, uh,
They-
just on sort of
they're calling him a beta male. That's what the right is calling him.
well,
But
that's
he seems to be inspiring and unifying and nice, actually.
nice is kryptonite to MAGA Republicans, and just physically, kind of looks like John Ossoff, you know, millennial, a little boyish in the face, uh, but Ossoff seems to be surviving in Georgia. Of course, proof will come in November, but he's leading in polls there right now. Uh, and I think both Ossoff and Talarico, there's at least what we've seen so far an inner toughness. I mean, Talarico did get tested here. He did have to weather a scandal of sorts, where someone who had been a supporter of his, African American woman, said that he told her privately he didn't sign up to run against an accomplished black woman. He signed up to run against a mediocre black male, and Colin Allred. Talarico said it's not quite what he said. He said Allred's campaigning was mediocre, not that it didn't make it about race. So he never actually apologized that someone demanded that he do, but he tried to be kind of apologetic in his demeanor about it. And then got, a bona fide Colbert bump.
Big time. Big
Those who
time.
remember the old, Colbert Factor show used to joke about the Colbert bump. This was a
This happened.
unmistakable
Yeah.
Colbert bump. And in my mind, it's not just that he got on the show. It's not just that CBS tried to block the interview and it only was shown on YouTube and not on broadcast. But Talarico did a really good job in that interview. I think for a lot of people, this might have been the first time they saw him, and he held his own very, very well. He even answered the question about that scandal in that interview, and so he really kind of put it to bed there. And combined with the fact that I think Talarico put together a more robust campaign, was in the race for a longer period of time. Crockett jumped in kind of late, and Crockett had the mentality of, and we talked about this on a previous show, let's be combative, be confrontational.
Mhm.
Let's try to kick out dust on social media. Let's attack Trump frontally and try to grow the base of support. I'm not going to appeal to moderates and other Republicans. I'm just going to throw a lot of roundhouses. Talarico, not a moderate, I mean, on the issue list, not a whole lot of difference between him and Crockett. Rails against the billionaires very much like a Bernie Sanders candidate. But leavened it with appeals to Republicans, talks about Trump members in his family, campaigned in the western and southern parts of Texas more than Crockett did, but that's more rural. And so I think showed a lot of quiet strength in doing that. I kind of go along with the trends.
I agree. I think he can expand the base, turn out the base, and peel off some Republicans. And so I have a piece in the LA Times today, Bill. It'll be in the print on Sunday, about how Democrats need all the stars to align to win a state like Texas, a state that Donald Trump won by 14 points. And I think the first couple of stars have aligned. I think Talarico is the better candidate. He is the nominee. Check first star one to align. Star two is that Crockett, I think, very quickly was conciliatory and a concession, which I think is a key ingredient that Democrats can heal their wounds. It seems like that's happening. Second star line.
I would note there, Crockett gave an interview to the New York Times where she was a little less conciliatory.
Okay, maybe I didn't see that. I'm looking at her concession speech where she talked about how,
the concession was
everything
on point.
is in flux. What did you see? This is going to mess up my column, isn't it?
Well, she gave a little bit of an elbow, that's, basically saying that, you can't count on my voters showing up, uh,
Mm,
because
mm,
of the voter suppression that happened in Dallas. There's a whole kerfuffle where, uh people got told the wrong precinct to go to, or at least were confused about what precinct to go to. And the one judge said, "Okay, we'll extend the hours." Then Paxton, the Republican Senate candidate and Attorney General, appealed, saying shut it down. Texas Supreme Court did shut it down, and so those people voted provisionally, and those votes are probably not going to count. Uh, so she said something along the lines of that. Sort of, it's not her job to uh, so she was asked if she's gonna stump with Talarico, and
mhm,
she would not commit to
mm.
that, and so it's
That's
not
kind
my
of the
job.
opposite vibe of what she said the day after the election. I mean, I could pull it up. Her statement was like the opposite of that, Bill. But be that as it may, as long as she doesn't enter into sort of a protracted campaign to destroy
No,
Talarico,
I don't think she's gonna go score shirts or anything, but I think she's sending a message to Talarico, "You're gonna have to work
yeah,
to
I
get
think he
me
will.
110% on board and to get and to get the black vote on board." It's like
I think he will.
I mean, I see. She's gonna put in the. I'm sure he's gonna put in the effort. But this is a challenge for Talarico here. Texas is a big state. Okay, it's an expensive state. It's a sprawling state. It's a diverse state, and he has not been challenged by Republicans yet. I see someone in the comments saying they're already calling him woke.
Yeah.
Again, he is a progressive.
Yeah, well,
And
Ramesh Ponnuru had a piece in the Washington Post pointing out some of the things that are going to potentially haunt Talarico in the general election in Texas. And Josh Barrow said he should do what Mamdani did, which is like shake the Etch a Sketch and just right now say like, I said some of these things and I did, and I changed my mind on some of them. You know what I mean? Like
Well,
he needs to address those
that's not
things
how
quickly.
Mondale won the election. He's doing a little bit of that once he got elected, but he
I'm
didn't
just telling
stand
you
up.
how Josh Barrow framed it, but anyway, Talarico, for I'll give you one example. He talks about his faith a lot, and apparently he said something about God being non-binary. We talk about God the Father, God the Son, that kind of thing. But so look, I think you could certainly make sort of an esoteric theological argument that God doesn't fit into our paradigm, and is just beyond our thinking in terms of gender. But I don't know that that's going to play well in Beaumont. You know what I'm saying?
Well,
So that could be a problem.
this is what's not been tested. I mean, I've seen other video of Talarico. I saw a video on it just came on my YouTube Shorts. I clicked one Talarico thing, and I'm getting all these Talarico shorts in my recommend.
That's the
Uh,
algorithm, baby.
um, so there was a bill. It was some kind of Ten Commandments bill.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yep.
I guess putting Ten Commandments in schools or public buildings, something like that. I don't know the
Yeah.
specific.
He talked about
Uh,
that on Colbert.
and he's having a dialogue with the bill sponsor on the House floor, and it's a Saturday. And Talarico's like, "Can you tell me what the fourth commandment is? Oh, don't work on the Sabbath. Can you tell me what today is? It's
Yeah.
Saturday. Can you tell me what day the Jewish Sabbath is? Oh, it's Saturday. Can you tell me when we're going to vote on the bill? Sunday. Can you tell me when the Christian Sabbath is?" And the spider's like, "Oh yeah, it's kind of funny, this coincidence." And he's kind of like, "It's not just funny. It's like you don't know what
Yeah.
these commandments are. You are a giant hypocrite." He didn't say those words, but that was clearly hanging in the air. So
Yeah.
I think the
He's
Talarico.
tougher. He sort of kills you. He tells you to go to hell and he has you looking forward to the trip, right? You know what I mean? Like he is tough in a way that's like comes across as friendly and nice at the same time
So,
to everyone else.
does this play in a general? I mean, this is almost kind of like uh, a liberal egghead approach to the Bible. I'm going to defend myself. I'm going to show you how much I know about the Bible to make my point. Is that going to get steamrolled by a lot of slash and burn
Yeah.
headings? I don't know. Well, what I'm saying is that he hasn't been tested here on the stage. Obama, the classic Obama example in the 2008 primary was that in the spring is when the Goddamn America Jeremiah Wright video came out. And here, so you're all kind of hopped up on hope and change with Obama, but now
Hmm.
before the nomination is done, you get to see in real time how does he deal with a classic manufactured scandal. And he gave the More Perfect Union speech, which blew everybody away, and that put and that kind of sealed the deal.
Yeah,
We haven't seen, so Talarico got a little bit of it on Colbert again with the Colin Allred flap, but we haven't really seen how he handles a howitzer from the right. But we
right.
will, I'm sure, very soon.
I don't want to get into a religious discussion here, but I do have a piece at the Hill from 2 weeks ago where I went through Talarico's sort of theology, the things he believes, and talk about where it squares and where it doesn't jibe with like sort of mainstream Protestant theology. So if you're a nerd, check that out. Bill, so the next question is, though, the next star that might align, because I think, again, all the stars should align if Democrats are going to do this. They need Paxton to be the nominee. Ken Paxton,
Well, they will say,
well, let me
let's not
set it up.
assume that. Let's not assume that.
Okay, I agree. I agree. I think Talarico could beat Cornyn. Okay, but let me just set this up, and then you can
Okay.
shoot it down.
Okay.
So Democrats would like Ken Paxton, the scandal-plagued, skeevy Attorney General, to be the nominee. And even better, Bill, would be there's going to be like 3 months of a runoff election. Like it's not till after the day after Memorial Day when this Texas runoff would take place. So it's possible that
Well,
Cornyn and
Trump
Paxton
wants to shut it down.
they could beat each other up, but that's the next thing. Donald Trump is now saying very soon, he's going to endorse somebody. And speculation is that he's going to do the smart thing, which would be to endorse Cornyn. But I'm not 100% sure he will or that he'll do it soon. What do you think?
Uh, I don't want to assume. Uh, Paxton said the other day or yesterday, I'll drop out if John Cornyn, and the Republicans end the filibuster and pass the SAVE Act, which is a voter suppression bill. And probably Trump did not take kindly to that. And I think even told Politico, this might make me go the other way, as if his mind wasn't already made up. But again, trying to mind read Trump is very challenging, and so he could do whatever. I don't think he really. I think most people think he likes Paxton better than Cornyn, but he's been on the whole kind of a good boy in Senate races. He's not been as eager to elevate the craziest person in these primaries because he seems to understand that this is not going to be a good midterm year and needs to be extra careful that this doesn't that he doesn't lose the Senate, which would be much worse than just losing the House. So I really don't know, but if Trump does what Republicans want, which is to endorse Cornyn, get Paxton out of the race, avoid a runoff. So that's one scenario. But will there be still MAGA Texans who won't like that? Because I mean, Cornyn goes to Republican convention in Texas and gets booed on a regular basis.
Yeah.
So
Trump's endorsements don't always pan out. In fact, he endorsed the agriculture commissioner for reelection and lost that one. So,
which is why I kind of think Paxton's not going to drop out, even if Cornyn gets endorsed. But that's kind of what Paxton is saying. This is a guy who's had 9 lives before, so and probably thinks he's got a pretty good handle on the Texas Republican electorate. And Cornyn, I mean, people are kind of impressed that Cornyn got the most votes, although I think there's still maybe a chance Paxton could eke a lead as votes trickle in. But I think as it stands, Cornyn has up 1 point over him.
Yeah, I think
suggested.
Cornyn got 42% of the vote, and Paxton got 41.
That's not good. 42 is not good if you're the incumbent in your own party's primary.
That means 58% of Texas Republicans voted for someone else.
Yeah, if I'm Paxton, I wouldn't be scared off. What does he have to lose? Stick it in it,
So if this runoff election, which again is like a 3-month long affair that could be very nasty, very bitter, if this thing goes through, then whoever emerges in June as the Republican nominee would presumably be battered. And I think if Paxton emerges from that, then the contrast with Talarico is very favorable for Democrats. It's a very clear contrast. But even if Cornyn does end up emerging from that, scrum, he's going to be battered. And as you said, Bill, he's not beloved by the base. So I think Talarico has a shot either way.
I want to make one other point here. So again, we're all assuming that Paxton's the weaker candidate, which I'm not saying is wrong, but the most recent poll that we have is a University of Houston poll, and it has this is assessing general election. It has Cornyn over Talarico by 1 and Paxton over Talarico by 2. Now there's other polls that show a little bit different, but I mean, one, it's competitive. At minimum, it's competitive.
Yeah.
And we don't know if Cornyn is able to hold on to all of that Republican base in a general. The composition of their totals might be a little different. But both Paxton and Cornyn have their own weaknesses here.
Yeah. But don't you think, Bill, that the immigrant caravan that will be heading toward Texas will get those Republicans out to vote?
Look, I mean, I've been saying this for months that Republicans have torched their Latino support in Texas. It's true that Democrats had a lot of simplistic assumptions about the Latino vote in Texas, that it was sort of naturally progressive and all anti-immigrant, which it is not. You have a lot of fourth, fifth generation people who don't necessarily love new immigrants coming in. The Democrats did terrible on the southern border with Latinos in recent elections, but the mass deportation strategy has been so chaotic and so poorly executed that you've seen a massive Hispanic swing nationally towards Democrats. And that's why you can't assume that more caravan hysteria is going to save Republicans this time around.
A couple other election stories out there, Bill. Also in Texas, Rep. Tony Gonzalez finally decided to drop his reelection bid a day after he admitted to an affair with a female staff member who killed herself. And then we've got Steve Daines, senator from Montana, out of the blue, and at the 11th hour, sort of last minute, pulled out and decided not to run for reelection to the Senate up in Montana. Thoughts on either of those or both?
Well, just quickly on the Texas one, Gonzalez dropping out leaves a very, very far right candidate for the Republicans, known as the AK guy. And this is a district with Uvalde in it. And look, it's not a deep blue area. I'm sure there are plenty of Second Amendment people in rural West Texas on the southern border. But Gonzalez survived as a more moderate Republican. This is also where the Democrat Henry Cuellar has survived as more of a moderate Democrat. This, I would think, this becomes more of a jump ball with Gonzalez, out for the general. And
is it too late for Matthew McConaughey to jump in?
I don't know what you can do. I don't think you can do third party there. And then for Montana, to have an incumbent step down, Montana is a place that has the Democrats in recent memory. It's gotten more red. It's gotten more red as it's gotten more wealthy conservative transplants moving in. But it does have a history of electing Democrats, John Tester being the most recent. And Tester is part of a strategy to get an independent candidate who is essentially, a center-left candidate, and to not have the Democrats put up a credible candidate. There are Democrats running, but Tester's trying to sideline them. Apparently, there aren't any big names there. And this is kind of what Dan Osborne tried to do in Nebraska and kind of got sort of far with it, but not far enough. And then he's trying to do it again. So I'm not saying it's necessarily a brilliant strategy, but it's something that Democrats are kind of interested in, and it has more of a chance of working if you're not up against an incumbent. I'm not as morally offended by what Daines did as some are. They essentially, blocked any other Republican from getting in because his favorite guy knew the inside scoop. And so the filing deadline was 5 o'clock. Daines says, I'm not running at 4:50, and his guy files at 4:55, and no one else gets a shot at it. But I'm more Machiavellian here. Like, he did what he had to do to get his guy, and Daines' argument, which I think is a fair argument, prevent a more perhaps big name Democrat from wanting to jump in the race. So look, if you're a Republican, you want to run, like, get some spine and file yourself. Don't be scared off by Steve Daines. If you didn't have that gumption, then go crying your beer, as far as I'm concerned.
All right, let's move to Iran. I'm going to get to your piece in Washington Monthly in a second, but first, just broadly speaking here, Bill, kind of a tale of two wars. Like, on one hand, it clearly the gas prices are up here in the U.S., probably, partly attributed to the closing of the was it Gulf of Hormuz or
Strait of Hormuz.
Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah.
I was not a foreign policy major. I did not write my dissertation on Iran. And then you've obviously had, like, administration officials really just struggle to define, like, the justification for why this is happening. Multiple justifications for why Donald Trump decided to do this, and really no clear exit plan or objectives, all that. So there's a messiness to it. On the other hand, it seems very clear to me that we are just destroying Iran. We've obviously, taken out, kind of decapitated the top of the regime. And so, is this going well? Is this going poorly? What does this portend?
I don't feel good about it. As far as I can tell, the military mission is being executed as intended. I don't have a skepticism at the military's proficiency. But this seems to be willfully ignorant of how wars in the Middle East tend to go. You can do the shock and awe part well. It doesn't mean that what happens in the months afterwards is going to go to your liking. And I've written some about this in the Washington Monthly, and forgive me if I'll plug this properly again, but one of my colleagues, Samantha Powers, has a really good piece about why Democrats chose Talarico that I should have mentioned earlier, and how this cuts against the notion that Democrats always want to pick, sort of the slash and burn type. So I urge you to go to WashingtonMonthly.com and read her piece. But I had a piece earlier in the week on Iran, which, we should remind ourselves that there are precedents being set here that are very dangerous. We are the signatories to a treaty which has force of law, not just internationally but domestically. We signed it, we ratified it. We don't assassinate heads of state. And there's also an executive order to that effect as well that has been in effect since the time of Gerald Ford. And you do that because in the treaty itself, it says, so we will be able to conduct normal international relations. How do heads of state negotiate anything? We're in negotiation with Iran in February. We had 3 weeks of negotiations, in Geneva. And Iran didn't walk away from the table. Trump didn't like the offers that they had, but they were making offers. And so if you're going to be able to say, I don't like your offer, you're dead. How do you get anybody to the table in that environment? Everyone's going to go to their corners and lock and load, because that's the only way to survive. And
look, Trump said, "I got him before he got me," or something like that.
Yeah.
And apparently, it seems to me, at least one of the arguments coming from the Speaker of the House and the Secretary of State, is that the U.S. went in when we did because Israel had determined they were going to go in with or without us, and that there would be retaliation from Iran that could endanger U.S. forces. But what Israel apparently, when they decided to go in, the reason they decided to go in was that they knew that the Ayatollah was vulnerable at that moment. They knew where he was, and so they were trying to take him out specifically, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And so we were a part of that effort. Now,
I haven't written. I'm thinking about writing this piece. I haven't written it yet. I want to do a bit more research. So forgive me if this idea is a little half baked and not fully well researched. But just in terms of my memory, I can't think of many examples of a dictator being ousted who is a theocrat, particularly an Islamic theocrat in this region, with the exception of the Taliban in Afghanistan, Mullah Omar after 9/11. So we nudged out Mubarak in Egypt. We nudged out we had Saddam Hussein out in Iraq. We got Gaddafi out in Libya through different direct, indirect means. But the aftermaths of all those weren't great. They weren't like they don't come out cleanly. But I think it's another order to try to dislodge a fervently theocratic, terroristic, religious extremists, because they're kind of fatalistic. Martyrdom is not a bad thing for them. And so I think on some level they're fully. We may not be in power forever, but it's not like we're going to give up and go home. The Taliban didn't give up. They were out of power for a long time, but the war raged on to the point where we got tired of it. And who let the Taliban back in? Donald Trump, because he was sick and tired of being in a forever war. And the Iranian government is far more entrenched than the Taliban was. Maybe we can knock them all out, possibly. I don't know. I don't think it's inconceivable, but I do know they're not going to go away after that.
Right.
And so
but Trump is now saying, correct me if I'm wrong, that this isn't over until there's an unconditional surrender from Iran and that he gets to pick the next leader. This is fairly new news, I think, and I hope I'm not botching it. But to me, when Trump sets that up, that makes it much harder now to get out of this with less than regime change and to get out of this gracefully with honor. Well, you couldn't have done it without honor anyway, but you know what I'm saying? Like, otherwise, couldn't Trump have just left tomorrow and said, well, we killed their dictator and we crippled their nuclear ambitions, mission accomplished, we won. But now that he said they have to have an unconditional surrender and I have to be able to pick their successor, doesn't that make it much more likely that there's like that we get bogged down there?
Well, I assume that at some point Donald Trump's going to say, "We did it, we won."
But isn't it harder to do that now today than yesterday?
Well, everything about this is harder. I mean, look, he is. I always hate being here, and I always end up here being an armchair psychoanalyst with Donald Trump. I don't know how else to handle Donald Trump because he's such an irrational brain, but I think Donald Trump really gets off on the wielding of power. That's what keeps him going. And it's like a heroin addiction that once you do it once, you want to get that fix again, but you got to go harder and harder each time to get that fix. And there's so many ways where he's been stifled. The Supreme Court says he can't do the tariffs where he wants to do them. Backlash in Minneapolis means he can't deploy ICE the way he wants to. And I think for the longest time, he was very reluctant to turn to the military to satisfy this craving because once you use the military, you can't control things afterwards. War does not go the way you always want it to go. And I think he recognized that before. He railed against the Iraq War during the Republican primaries, going in there for lies and then not getting the oil that you wanted to get, all that stuff. But over the course of this year, He does a 12-day war in Iran, seems to go fine. He starts blowing up these drug boats, seems to go fine. Goes into Venezuela, kidnaps the leader, is able to put his thumb on the scale and essentially, and not go through all that hard democracy work. That's a big mess. I can just take this other dictator and have them do my bidding and give me more access to the oil. That seems to work out okay. So he just like in his whole political career, he keeps getting validated for all the wrong reasons. But it's different to get a, non-theocratic dictator in Venezuela, because Trump's basically saying you can still do dictatorial things, release some political prisoners here, but keep some more over there. I'm not going to make you do an election. You can still all you guys can still live in luxury. I don't really care. Just give me a share of your oil. Like, apparently that can be done. But asking people who are deeply committed to Islamic revolution, I don't think it's going to be as simple to say you pick that guy in your circle. I'll accept him. That strikes me. I'm not enmeshed in Iranian politics, so I could be. I'm not the Iranian foreign policy expert, so I could be wrong. But that strikes me as a more difficult task. And maybe Trump will try to declare it and say, okay, that guy, he was one of our guys. Sure, yeah, I'll accept that. But I still would think that bad things are going to follow afterwards, and the bad things might be 5 years, 10 years from now. Who knows when we could get hit with a 9/11 type attack from Iran? It took them from 1953 to 1979 to overthrow the Shah. These are people with long memories. So none of this is reassuring to me.
Yeah, someone said the other day that the Lockerbie bombing was a couple years after we hit Libya. So we don't know when the next shoe is going to drop.
But can I turn the tables on you, Matt?
Well, go ahead.
Well, because I think historically you've been more of an Iran hawk than me, right? You didn't like the Obama deal,
probably,
right?
No, fair.
And I wrote a piece today for the Washington Monthly because I'm fascinated by the fact that Trump is still trashing the Obama deal. And to my mind, it's because Trump has always, the fact that he is Mr. Art of the Deal has been central to his persona. That's why you would even consider him for president when he had no political experience at all, because he makes deals like nobody's business. It's the name of his book in '87. It's how he introduced himself on The Apprentice in 2004. It's how he announced it in his Golden Elevator speech in 2015. It was in the 2016 nomination acceptance speech. It is key. And in the first term, we didn't have a lot of great deals. He tried to sell certain things as deals. Look what I did with North Korea. What an awesome deal I have here in North Korea. Look, I have a new Korean trade deal. I fixed NAFTA. But none of those things were good enough to get him reelected. He trashes deals in 2024. He says we're on the brink of World War III. I'll go in there. I'm going to make Ukraine end in 24 hours. It'll be so easy. I'm Mr. Deal. And then even in the first year, I ended 8 wars. Look at me. I should get a Nobel Peace Prize. But he doesn't solve Ukraine, and he gets more captivated with exerting military power. And so he has to trash Obama's Iran deal because it's glaring at you in the face. Someone got a deal there. Someone was able to figure it out. You claim that Obama was going to start a war with Iran to get reelected. It seems like you're the guy doing it now. He did the deal. You didn't. So from my perspective, the Obama deal was working. No deal is perfect, but Iran was complying at that point. The argument against the deal was it had these sunset provisions.
That was one argument against the deal.
That the centrifuge limits were going to end in 10 years, and the levels of enrichment level cap was going to end in 15 years. And so Trump even said the other day, I didn't terminate this deal. It's going to expire anyway. But there are other provisions of the deal that were permanent. The inspection regime was going to be permanent. So even if you were skeptical about it, there's still an argument to make that this was working as good as anything else had been working. And if the alternative is this, I mean, again, if you're a hawk, maybe you're doing the touchdown dance right now. This is Lindsey Graham. This is what he always wanted. He did not want the Iran deal because he wanted this. So I'm asking you, Matt Lewis, is this what you wanted? Is this you think the only solution here? Because Iran's not a country one could deal with. You can't do a deal with them. This is the best you can do. Or do you think, or in retrospect, maybe that Obama deal is a bad thing to try out and see how that was going to go?
Well, look, I mean, I would be open to if Marco Rubio or Donald Trump sat down at the Oval Office and looked me in the eye, looked the American people in the eye, and had a coherent reason, like we thought that we had obliterated the nuclear program. They have reconstructed it. We didn't get as much as we thought. We have a commitment that Iran cannot go nuclear. Let's be honest. We feel that they're very vulnerable right now, that their ability to use Hezbollah has been deteriorated, yada, yada, yada. Therefore, in conjunction with our many allies across the globe, we have decided to take action now to save lives. And this is not an effort to topple the regime, or we will not have boots on the ground, whatever. Now, look, I know you don't want to telegraph everything to the enemy, obviously, but I do think it is incumbent upon you to, like, I don't know, go before Congress and get a declaration of war, go before the American people and explain clearly defined objectives and a clear exit strategy without giving away all the details. And so, yes, I mean, if a president, I can't imagine Trump could or would do the things I just laid out, but if a competent president were to lay out that case, I very well may be amenable and may support that action. But Donald Trump hasn't done that and isn't the kind of person that I trust to execute wisely and prudently this sort of thing. And it seems like, he apparently didn't learn all the lessons from Iraq and Afghanistan, that even though he ran against George W. Bush in a manner of speaking, didn't really learn those lessons, which apparently I've learned more than he has from that. So a long-winded way of saying that I would be open to going after Iran, but not in the way that Donald Trump has done it. He hasn't convinced me. And the fact that there have been so many different excuses, it does appear that it appears to me that Israel has dragged us into this in a way that I find to be kind of manipulative and uncool. This needs to be put and make America first. And we can have friends and allies and all that, but this has to be in our best interest in terms of national security. So that's where I am, Bill. Does that make sense, or am I full of it here?
No, it makes sense. I mean, it sounds sort of like you're where John Bolton is. Like, you would love to do this in theory, but you would do it in a far more thoughtful and deliberative fashion.
I'd be totally open to it if presented that this is the right thing to do for the American people. Because let's be honest, Iran is a dangerous, evil regime, and they have sponsored terrorism. And the idea of them having nuclear weapons isn't just a danger to Israel; it's a danger to all freedom-loving people. But I don't think that he's made the case. In fact, Trump recently said that they were 2 weeks away from getting nuclear weapons. That just seems unbelievable, and he's lying to us. So,
but does anything that I said about the inherent difficulty of dislodging a intensely radical theocratic regime? I don't want to be a total pessimist. I mean, I'm a generally optimistic person. I want to believe there is a way to organically get Iran to a democratic place, that the people there and potentially could rise up at some point. And I would love to come up with strategies that would assist with that. I mean, again, I don't want to be I'm not an isolationist person, but the challenge of dislodging a 47-year revolutionary Islamist regime strikes me as such a tall order. I don't know what you could put on paper to say, I got to figure it out. Here's how I'm going to do it. Here's the 5-step plan for how I'm going to do it militarily.
Right.
I heard John Bolton talk about this the other day, and I sort of appreciate he's being a critic of Trump and pointing out the weaknesses of his strategy. but he seemed way too confident that he knew how to do this right and no one else does.
No one knows anything. The best and the brightest got us into Vietnam, and look, I mean, Cheney and Rumsfeld, say what you will, highly qualified, highly experienced, and look what happened in Iraq. So, and if they did that, if the best and the brightest got us into these quagmires, imagine what the worst of the worst, the Trump administration might do. Imagine, like, Kristi Noem, and you just get down the list of these stooges, what they might. Now, look, I'm sure some of the high-ranking military officials are very competent, and clearly so far have done a good job of executing what they can do. But the larger question is not. I mean, look, it's very hard, if not impossible, to get regime change from air power. You have to have boots on the ground. Most people believe that, at least traditionally. I mean, it didn't. The Blitz didn't work out great. The London Blitz didn't work out great for Germany. We certainly had air power in Vietnam, and really, a lot of times, what it does is it actually kind of backfires in a sense. The public becomes more and more united against you, as a sort of the air pirate thing that they said about John McCain. So, look, I think that your concerns are well founded, Bill. And again, for me, it would have to be, here's what we're going to do: we're going to take out their nuclear capacity, and we're going to create an opening, a chance for there to be a popular uprising where the people get to decide. But what we are not going to do, we're not going to do democracy building. We're not going to attempt regime change. It would have to be very limited and clearly defined. And I think you could make an argument that that would be worth doing if we could really cripple the regime and their capacity to go nuclear. Then that maybe you do declare mission accomplished and leave. I just think Trump is now, when he says he has to pick the next ruler, when he says he needs an unconditional surrender, he is that's defined, but it's a much harder ask than just leaving.
Well, I mean, you mentioned, the Iraq debacle before. I mean, what exactly happened there? We
Well,
dislodged, we dislodged a
be-
strongman,
yeah,
and we tried to bring in a democracy, and kind of did, quite frankly. I mean, Iraq's probably one of the more democratic regimes in the region right now. But
debathification was the fundamental error when
I mean, they got rid of all the remnants of the strongman dictatorship, and when they made the government more democratic, it led in more Islamist theocrats
yeah,
into the government. And not that they're the majority, but the faction there is intense, uh, and they became more Iran aligned because of it. I mean, the reason why America backed dictators in the region for so long is to suppress all these
yeah.
Islamist clerics. And
Dictators and double standards. I mean, there's an
right.
argument. There's an argument for it. It's better to have a pro-American authoritarian who keeps order than an anti-American totalitarian, especially when the Cold War was really the defining existential threat. Once
Let's
that
see.
Cold War ends, that's when we start getting into these other questions.
But that seems to be what we're trying to replicate here again. We're trying to get back to keeping our boot on the neck of these elements, which seems to just lead to an endless cycle of asymmetric warfare. Instead of trying to find a way to reduce the demand for this kind of terrorist thinking, and so in either way, we're not since we're not able to reduce the demand for it. You're either getting rid of a strong man that allows more of those elements to get into a government, or in a case of Iran, you already have that government, and you don't really seem to have a plan to get rid of the appetite. You might decapitate the head of the government. Maybe you'd even get rid of the government somehow. That doesn't seem obvious to me how it's going to happen. But even if you did, the appetite for that's still going to be there, and the asymmetric warfare is going to continue. And I think Americans are not going to like seeing how that plays out
Yeah.
over the next several decades.
Well, I think a fundamental problem with Iraq was, it took us like hundreds and hundreds of years from the signing of the Magna Carta to today to develop liberal democracy and liberal democratic institutions. You can't expect to topple um, an authoritarian, and for people who have really no experience with democracy, of the evolution getting toward democracy, to suddenly take it up, right? Especially when you take out the police force, the people providing, water, all of that. It was just unrealistic to think that you could turn Iraq kind of overnight into a like liberal democracy. And so they really probably should have kept some of Saddam's people in place, and had more just realistic expectations of what the short-term goals could be. I actually think in Iran, it's also very different, not only because there's a theocratic leader who now is a martyr. So it's different from Iraq in a negative way, but also in a more positive way too, Bill. Iran is a highly educated country, which has a tradition of being, the Persian tradition of being like much more pro-Western. So it's also conceivable that a popular uprising, if it were ever to actually take hold, it's kind of hard when the bad guys have the guns and you don't. But if it were to happen, that they could self-govern and have a democratic type of system, a more democratic type system, because they have a more educated Western populace.
I mean, that's always been the hope, and so but we keep going on this theory that we're gonna come in guns a-blazing, and they're gonna rise up on their own, and but Trump seems to be talking as if, like, "We're giving you the opportunity to do that, but if you don't do it, whatever. I've done what I can do. I guess I still get to spike the football, cut the ribbon, say mission accomplished. And everything bad that happens after that, that's your fault, not my fault. Which might be fine to keep him, allow him to go to sleep at night, but I don't think it's going to leave an aftermath that's going to be good for us in the world for the next several years.
I think that's for sure. And then the question is, and maybe we end on this: would that, if things do go sideways in Iran and we just sort of leave, we cut and run, declare victory, um, but they end up no better off, maybe worse off than they were before. Does that splash back and hurt Trump politically, or is this just we move on to the next scandal, the next controversy?
Yeah, I don't really look at this so much in terms of short-term politics. I mean, Trump's not on the ballot again. I mean, Trump doesn't care how it means for him politically. Question is, what does it do for, as far as the politics are concerned, what does it do for the Republicans and the Democrats? And I kind of suspect Trump's going to declare victory before November, one way or another. And it may not be what we talk about in November. We might get back to more
Yeah.
pedestrian economic concerns unless it could well be that Trump declares it's over. The Straits of Hormuz open again, gas prices come down, and Trump thinks he's done a triple axle. But I think there's going to be other lingering economic concerns, other frustrations and anxieties that are still going to be bad for Republicans. But that's why if I'm a Democrat, I'm not going to look at this through a political lens. This is not about how to win in November. This is about how we're going to function as a global superpower, and how am I going to try to clean up the mess of the shattered precedents that Trump has created when the day comes when I get back into power.
Well, even if Democrats don't try to make hay or don't gain specifically from what happens in Iran, it is clear, though, that the Trump coalition, which was always this sort of unwieldy, um, mess that was slapped together, and it really worked in 2024 for about a minute there. But you have the people eating McDonald's every 3 meals a day next to the Maha Mom, and you had the Lindsey Graham in the same coalition with Tucker Carlson. And I do think there's a lot of kind of the young guy podcast listener, and then the Hispanic voters, like the people who joined, the last people who joined the Trump coalition in 2024 have now fallen away. And I think it has to do with the Epstein files. I think it has to do with ICE. And now I think it has to do with Iran. Donald Trump ran for president
And
about
prices.
And well, the affordability, that's the big issue that's impacting everything for everybody, not just young podcast bros. But this coalition is fracturing, and Iran, I think, just reinforces the sense that there's some buyer's remorse and false advertising.
I mean, I hear the argument that, most MAGA people are just Trump loyalists, and so even though you're hearing the Tucker Carlsons in the manosphere grind their teeth, polling is not showing a real collapse in Republican support over this. But I think to your point, this was a tenuous coalition to begin with. Trump might say it was a big landslide, he won every swing state, but generally speaking, not by a lot. He still was under 50% of the vote, even if he had more votes than Kamala Harris. This is always very tenuous. And it was a Frankenstein coalition that Trump didn't do any, because he's not a strategic thinker. He's not a long-term thinker. He didn't say, okay, I got these people with different viewpoints in my coalition. Maybe I'll do something really smart economically to bind it together permanently. Instead, he did everything possible to drive wedges within his own coalition. So if you're a Democrat, again, you don't have to overthink the politics here of Iran. The coalition is fracturing. The Republican coalition is fracturing on its own. So think about what is the right thing substantively. What is the right way to reorientate foreign policy after this, and not worry about, am I going to look bad if I'm against this war like that? I don't think that's. I'll keep my criticism to something low-key procedural in case we win. We want to get on the winning side. I don't think you have to think that way here.
All right, everybody. Well, we have gone long today, and you've gotten your money's worth. So consider becoming a paid subscriber if you're watching on Substack. You get this nice long Friday show. I really went to the extremes on my knowledge about debathification and things like that. So you got your money's worth. If you are subscribing to me, make sure to subscribe to Bill Scher and Washington Monthly. Like, rate, review, leave a comment, all that good stuff. Any final thoughts, Bill?
Well, check out WashingtonMonthly.com. I have 2 Iran columns this week that I referenced in the show. Check out my colleague, and also my other colleague, Matthew Cooper, had a good Iran column at the onset of the war this week. Please check that out. And Samantha Powers, my Washington Monthly colleague, check out her take. She was actually she's in Texas. She was at the Talarico watch party, so she had a good on-the-ground view of how that race played out.
Awesome. And then definitely subscribe to Washington Monthly, the newsletter, the Substack newsletter, which is fantastic.
And the print publication. It's a bona fide magazine, just like in the old days.
Physical. I'm a physical reader. I like to actually hold it in my formerly nicotine stained hands, Bill. That's a Rush Limbaugh reference. I didn't smoke. All right. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Subscribe, all that good stuff. And Bill Scher, always a pleasure, my friend.
Same here. Take care.
All right, man. You got it. See you soon.